Greetings. I put up a couple videos of my experience while I was in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was on a real estate tour and I showed some of the real estate that I toured in and gave some feelings about Johannesburg, South Africa, wonderful country. And a number of my subscribers or people that view the videos listen to me like I'm a YouTube content creator, but they live in South Africa. So I said, they probably curious about American houses and American communities. I'm gonna call them villages for the sake of this video. And at some point, I'm gonna film some areas around the village that I live in here in the US. But one house I toured in Johannesburg, young lady, looked like she was in her 30s, African woman. And her house was full of antiques. And I said, boy, that was kind of unusual, but it was nice. So I showed her some pictures of my mother's house. And my mother, she was an old timer anyway, and she loved her antiques. And she had a bunch of them. And she had her house laid out with antiques. But I'm going to give you a little view of some of that. So here we go. This actually is her bedroom, and these houses are huge. As far as, these houses are old, first of all. They're about 120 years old, and a lot of these houses in the city. And some of them was pretty huge, and we had bigger families back in the U.S. back then, too, and those houses only had one bathroom, too. Imagine that. She did her house up pretty nice. What she did about 45 years ago, she bought some abandoned houses in this area, and we rehabbed them over the years. Hers was first. She was living here, and a sister that was living with me, sister 1 year older than me, she moved down here. So I remember us being huddled up in that little room back there that we just came from with a kerosene heater, and sitting around. That's where they had to stay at, because there wasn't no heat in this house at all. And back then, I'm talking about the late 1970s, early 1980s, January and February, it was normally single digits. It was 10 degrees or under 10 degrees. That was normal, right? So back here, the sister that was living with me, she moved down here and she put an apartment back here in the back of the house. And she had hooked this place up pretty nice. And it's still like it is really from back then when she first hooked it up. And I know her and my mother had this rebuilt. This is actually a working fireplace back here. But then over the years, my mother put a electric heater in here. Those things work pretty doggone good too. Now I have a younger sister, and she was collecting Oriental items and some Oriental furnishings. So back in the day, back around that time, I had got involved with some stuff called plaster craft. It was a warehouse, and they sold all these unpainted plaster figures and statues and all kinds of stuff. So I had started buying those, and I would paint them up, mainly with chalk. You had a board full of chalk colors, and you had a hard brush, and you brush on the colors. In some areas you could paint, and then you sprayed over it and it sealed everything in. And I had done 2 of these pieces for my sister. I had some other ones that I did. And that place was going out of business, and I had considered getting into that business myself and maybe even buying out a lot of this stuff. But at that time, I say the world was changing. and people really didn't have time for that kind of thing. You know, a piece like this might have taken me about 5 hours to do, you know, and the world was rush, 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 you know, so people really wasn't doing that kind of thing. So I backed away from that. But today, and you know, I know a lot of retirees because I'm up there in that retirement age now. So, you know, people might have more time to get into that kind of thing and relax. But this is just a couple rooms up in this old spot. And another thing, I'm a plumber by trade, retired. And this house is so big, I put the radiators in here. And my mother had some guys move a lot of them in place, and I installed them all. I had to break down the old stuff out of the radiators and put in new piping, right? So I put this radiator in here, this red thing. Now, people in Africa, a lot of places you don't need heat. Understand Johannesburg gets a little cold in July and maybe some of August, and you got a little snow last year. But heat here up in the Northeast is essential. And I have a house that I have forced air in. That's like central air conditioning. So when you have central air conditioning, you usually have a heater combined in that system. So it just blows out hot air for your heat in the wintertime and the cool air in the summertime. But those things, that's the first time I had that kind of heat. And I don't like it at all. But these radiators, they work off of a boiler. So your boiler will heat the water up hot, and it runs through all these radiators all over the house. So it might take an hour to get these things lit up, get them throwing out some heat. And once they are hot, they're going to throw out heat for about 6 hours, and I'm going to count another one, not this one, to give you an idea, because back then we used to go to a guy had a yard down in North Philadelphia. That's the town that I live in. And he used to sell these used radiators that was taken out of old abandoned houses all over the place. And he used to sell them by the section. So a section, he might sell for $2 a section, according to the size of the radiator, $2.50 a section. Now, a radiator like the one I just showed you, something like that, today would probably cost about $600, right? But if you was paying for the sections for that radiator and it had 20 sections and it was $2.50 a section, that would be $30 for that radiator, But what you had to go through to lift one of those things, it made it worth it. Now, this is her dining room, and she has all kind of antique stuff. And she got a collection of little cups, little vases and cups, little small ones. She had about 100 of them hanging on the wall in another room. And my sister packed those away. And this is her living room. You see a lot of everything looks modern in Johannesburg, most of the houses. That's why I say I was surprised to see that woman's house with all the antiques. But you don't see a lot of houses like these. This is a grand old house here. Grand old house. I remember I took my mother out one time. She wanted a little love seat. And we looked all over the place. And the very last place that I thought of, I took her to this place and found some old stuff in the back. And she found the love seat just the size she was looking for. And I got some guys. I used to hang with a bunch of guys. We used to fish and camp together all the time. And those guys had an upholstery shop. And they worked for an upholsterer. So they worked the upholstery shop on the side. And one of them guys took this love seat and he reupholstered it. And this is what it came out looking like. So this is very nice. Now, this radiator down here on the floor, me and the guy I grew up with, he was a little younger than me. I grew up with his big brother and his sisters. We bought this radiator in this house. This is the heaviest thing I ever carried in my life. And it's interesting that I found this radiator from that same place I was talking about to fit under this huge window and big enough to send heat up to cover this huge window, because that's what you want in a heating system. You want your radiation near doors and windows where cold air might come in, and you can have it heating that air. Now, I talk about my mother in the past tense because she died just a year ago, and right now we have her sitting in her favorite window. And she has been here for the last year in one of her favorite rooms. But this is what a great big old-time house looks like. And these houses, they will stand for another 100 years. No problem at all. These things are built. They built like old-time anything. This is quite a house. You don't see nothing else like this, quite like this, around here. Yeah, I'm going to take a little walk and show you another little thing. This room was the back of the house when my mother bought the house. And it was old. There was a brick wall back there that you're looking at. And my mother built this extension, had this extension built on the back of the house if the house wasn't big enough as it was. She had a kitchen put back here. And then back there is a bathroom and a closet back there. So these places are huge. I hope this ain't making you dizzy, me spinning this camera all over the place. But I'm going to show you what a boiler looks like. Because this house was all heat. And my original house was all heat. So these heaters, every year, I had to break them apart, take them apart, and brush them down, clean them out. Because that oil would make a soot inside. It would burn, and the soot would form on the steel inside of it. Just like those radiators I showed you, that's actually what's inside of a boiler. It's just like a radiator that a fire burns in the middle. So this is a boiler, right? And these houses are kind of big, so this boiler's kind of big. Now, my mother and me put the first one in here, just the two of us. These things weigh a couple 100 pounds. So I had a couple guys help me get it down here in the basement. So when it came time to install it, my mother and me, I had a 2-inch pipe, and I laid the pipe on the floor, and I set the heater, tilted it, and set it on this pipe. And the heater had to go back and fall onto a pad, right? It had to be elevated a little bit off the floor. So I put this pipe on the floor, had the heater on top of it, and I told my mother, look, we're going to roll it back and let it drop on that pad. And she looked at me like, you crazy. Because if it didn't work, yeah, we would have been in a fickle. But we pushed that thing, and it rolled back, and it dropped on that pad perfectly. Because it would have been tough to push that kind of weight around and make that adjustment. But this is the third one that's been installed in this house. Her and me put the first one in here. She had a second oil one put in here, and she decided to go with gas, which was more convenient. You know, oil you have to have delivered, and you have a tank down here in the basement that was in this space here, this brick spot on the wall. There's a tank that holds a couple 100 gallons of oil, and you burn that oil all month to heat your house. You know, this is how it worked. I piped all this pipe in here many years ago. Many years ago. It was crazy, crazy. But I end up piping 16 radiators in this house. And when this joint comes on and those radiators get heated up, it's comfort like you probably wouldn't get nowhere else, really. You know, that's an idea of what an old Philadelphia house, something else. When they build houses today, they got these little crappy joists, they're called. That's the wood that holds up the floor and hold up the roof in these houses, these old houses. So this is what an old joist look like, size-wise. Get away from that light. I wanted to show you my hand to get an idea. A new joist today, I want you to see that this is the side of it. So a new joist today might be about that wide, right? This is what an old joist is built like in these old houses. That's why I say this house will stand another 100 years, no problem. And they do have houses in this city that goes back to the days of old stinking George Washington. You got Betsy Ross, the woman who designed the American flag and sewed the American flag. They got old houses downtown in the center of the city, still standing, hundreds of years old. But they like little, call them tourist places that tourists can go and look at. But anyway, that's it, folks. This is kind of what an old Philadelphia, old American house look like. And I'm going to be showing you some more stuff down the line. So take it easy and talk to you again.